Howdy mates, good morning. Here's a video part 2. I have to talk a little quietly because I have to respect the other people that are here and even the wildlife that's found at this spot. So now I can finally reveal where I am. This is the deep hole at the Myakka River State Park near Sarasota. Now, maybe he's just seeing a large circle of water, but it's more than that. They call it deep hole for a reason. So, as I've learned, deep hole actually runs about 130 feet beneath the surface. And most of this is indeed black water, because of the tannins, of course. Now, with that being said, this is a great example of a large sinkhole that directly connects to Florida's aquifer, which is essentially a subterranean body of water. Now, since it is a bit deeper, that gives more opportunity for swimming and even just hanging out. Deep hole is well known for having a plethora of alligators. Now, give me just a second. I just need to adjust. There we go. So like you see one right there with its head sort of bobbing out. You can see some swimming out there in the distance. And there's even some way out there along the bank. So actually, I'm going to help you guys out. I want to provide you guys a perspective from my binoculars, if I can. Maybe. Hold on a second, you guys. Well, I tried to use my binoculars with the video camera, but it doesn't seem to work really well. Unfortunately, it's too bright, and unfortunately, when I take video, it really won't allow me to zoom in. But to clarify some differences between alligators and crocodiles is it really has to do with their distribution and their body shape. So like, for instance, you see that alligator right there. I'm making sure that I'm, of course, keeping my distance, staying away from it. As long as I don't bother it, it won't bother me. But usually with alligators, they will have a more U-shaped or rounded snout, at the opening of its mouth. Whereas a crocodile, on the other hand, has more of a sharp snout, more of like a V shape. And usually, with that being said, most crocodiles are only found in the Everglades that eventually connects into the Keys, as their body can only go through regulation of salt water. Unlike alligators, they can only survive in fresh water. And essentially that's what the Myakka River is. It's all fresh water. Now, with that being said too, another difference to look for is their teeth. So like alligators, for instance, they have no visible teeth in the mandible, which is like the lower jaw. Whereas crocodiles, on the other hand, they are visible. So that's another way that you can tell. Now, you can see like the upper teeth in the maxilla, which is also known as the upper jaw, but you can't see them in the lower jaw. So that's another way to know if you're looking at an alligator. Now, with that being said, Two, the alligators are actually considered an apex predator. So you may be wondering, what exactly does that mean? So given that they are an apex predator, there is no predator that is above them on the food chain. So that basically means no other form of wildlife goes after it, except us, of course. But they are like the police of a given ecosystem. They're always patrolling, looking out for other wildlife, whether it be birds, fish, you name it. They're always on the lookout. Now, they're also designated as a keystone species, so they actually serve a very high importance as an apex predator. So usually when they nest, that usually happens around the springtime, they can dig, perhaps down to 4 to 6 feet. They call them like mud holes. It can be a long, deep hole where I'm at right now, or even along a riverbank. But what they do is they dig through the mud, and that's where the females will hatch their eggs, incubate them for a couple of months. Usually the incubation and gestation period is for about 2 months or so. So usually by the time it hits around August or September, that's when they're born. But as we can see right now, these are all adults, because you can kind of tell, like, by its body length. Yeah, they're all mature. And I found that the record length of an American alligator in Florida was 14 feet, and that was a male. Usually the male alligators are a lot larger. Now, going back on the subject of mud burrows, once they hatch, they'll leave the burrow, and it can actually be used by other wading birds. For example, a great blue heron. So in a sense, an analogy I like to use about alligators is they're kind of like the gopher tortoise of a freshwater ecosystem, because they do a very similar duty. But at one point, a few decades ago, the alligators were actually facing endangerment due to habitat loss. That's the largest threat that faces the alligator. But eventually, the Florida State Park System and even the FWC eventually stepped in and wanted to essentially protect them. In a sense, even though now they're least concern because their populations are fine, they're actually still treated as a very delicate species, even though they're not threatened. So we really have to appreciate these homies right here. And what's neat about alligators too is they've existed for millions of years and have basically remained unchanged in terms of their body morphology. I mean, they even coexisted with the dinosaurs. So what does that tell you? They've been around for quite some time. They're older than even we are. But both alligators and crocodiles actually fall under a reptile class called crocodilians. And they're actually the only known types of reptiles that actually take care of their young for a couple of years. All the other reptiles that exist in the world, they're essentially like, okay, you're on your own, good luck. But alligators and crocodiles are the only type that actually play a maternal role in their development. So it's truly remarkable. Now, I wish there was one like out of the water right now, but oftentimes what they do, they have something called an osteoderm, which is kind of like their outer covering on their skin, which makes it appear rather scaly. Now, since they are a reptile, that means they're ectothermic, so they're cold-blooded. So in order for them to regulate their body temperature, they have to bask in the sunlight. So that's why I did a short little snippet earlier where you got to see some of the alligators out basking, because that's what they have to do in order to raise their body temperature. But yeah, and this video is a little longer, but I might actually do another short little snippet. So, alright you guys, thank you for watching. And you know, alligators are essentially those ecosystem engineers, and they're the apex predator. They're on the top of the food chain. Without them, none of the populations, you know, the lower trophic levels, none of them would be kept in check. So they're like the police, essentially. So alright you guys, hope you enjoyed this video, and once again, Journey on a Journey is outwards. Take care folks, see ya. Take care you guys.